David was a successful businessman in Lagos. Everyone who met him called him smart, confident, and lucky. He lived in a big house with his wife, Amara, a kind woman who had stood by him from the beginning. She had seen him when he had nothing, when he was just a man with dreams and a small shop on the street. She believed in him, prayed for him, and worked beside him. Together they built a life that others admired. But as time passed, David began to change. Money brought new friends, and new friends brought new habits. He no longer came home early. He no longer asked Amara about her day. When she spoke, he often looked at his phone or simply nodded without listening. Amara noticed, but she stayed patient. She believed that love could fix anything, even distance. One evening, while sitting in his office, David scrolled through his phone. He opened a social media app and saw a message from someone with the name Miss D. Her profile picture showed a woman wearing sunglasses, smiling softly. "You look like a man who never smiles," her message said. David laughed quietly and replied, "Maybe you haven't met me yet." That short reply began something he never expected. Every evening when work was done and the office was quiet, he chatted with Miss D. She was funny, bold, and seemed to understand him. She told him he worked too hard, that he deserved attention and rest. She called him Mr. Charming. Her words made him feel young again. When Amara tried to talk to him, he often brushed her off. "I'm tired," he would say. "Please, not now." She noticed that his phone was always in his hand and that he smiled at messages that she never saw. When she asked who he was texting, he answered quickly, "Just work." But work didn't make a man smile like that. Days turned into weeks. David found reasons to stay out late. He said there were meetings, but sometimes he simply sat in his car, texting Miss D. She told him stories, complimented him, and even sent him voice notes. Her voice was soft, confident, and full of laughter. Miss D seemed to know everything about him. She knew his favorite meal, that he liked fried plantain with fish, that he hated waking up early on Mondays, that he always tapped his pen when he was thinking. David found it strange but exciting. He felt seen again. Meanwhile, Amara's nights became quiet. She cooked dinner and waited. Sometimes she ate alone, staring at the clock. She prayed, "God, please bring my husband back to me." But her prayers felt unanswered. One night, while David was chatting with Miss D, she asked, "Do you love your wife?" He paused. His fingers hovered over the screen. "I do," he typed slowly, "but things have changed. She doesn't understand me anymore." Miss D replied, "Maybe she doesn't see the real you." Her words stayed in his head. The real him. What did that even mean? He began to believe her. Every time he spoke to Miss D, he felt important. Every time he spoke to Amara, he felt bored. One Friday evening, Miss D sent him a picture of her hand holding a cup of tea. The background looked familiar, but he didn't notice. She wrote, "I wish you were here with me." David smiled and replied, "Soon we will meet." The thought of meeting her made his heart race. He began to imagine what she looked like behind those sunglasses. Was her skin dark or light? Did she wear perfume? Did she laugh the same way in real life? He didn't know, but he wanted to. That weekend, Amara tried to bring life back into their marriage. She cooked his favorite meal, cleaned the house, and wore a new dress she had bought months ago. "Let's go out tomorrow," she said softly, "just the two of us." David smiled weakly. "I have work tomorrow," he said, checking his phone again. Amara nodded and walked away quietly, hiding her tears. That night she couldn't sleep. She looked at her husband sleeping beside her, the same man who once held her hand and promised forever. Now he slept with his phone in his hand. Something was wrong and she knew it. David's phone vibrated with a new message. Amara didn't want to look, but her heart told her to. She gently turned the phone and saw the message from Miss D. "Good night, my king." Her heart broke. She placed the phone back and wiped her tears. She didn't shout or wake him up. She just whispered to herself, "My king has another queen." The next morning, David left early. He hummed as he drove, thinking of Miss D. She had become the first thing he thought about when he woke up and the last thing before he slept. At work, his friend Connell noticed the change. "My brother," Connell teased, "you're glowing these days." "What's her name?" David laughed. "Just a friend," he said. Connell shook his head. "Be careful. The heart of a good woman is not something you should play with." But David waved it off. "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." He didn't know that his friend was not who he thought she was. He didn't know that every secret he typed, every story he shared, every compliment he gave, was leading him closer to the biggest shock of his life. At home, Amara decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. But she didn't want to fight or cry. She wanted truth. She spent the next few days observing, listening, and planning. She watched how David smiled when he received messages, how he hid his screen, how he changed his passwords. She even noticed that his perfume smelled different, one she didn't buy for him. She thought about the man she married, the man who used to wait for her after work, who once wrote love notes and said she was his piece. Where had that man gone? She didn't know, but she wanted to find him again, even if it meant facing the painful truth. That night, while David was in the shower, she sat on the bed and stared at his phone. It buzzed again. The name Miss D flashed across the screen. Her hand trembled, but she didn't touch it. She simply whispered, "One day I will know who you are." Outside, the city lights of Lagos flickered in the distance. Cars honked, music played, and life moved on, but inside their home, something beautiful was breaking. David had no idea that his sweet secret, his online fantasy, was closer than he could ever imagine. The game he thought was harmless was about to become the biggest lesson of his life. If only he knew who Miss D really was, he might have thought twice before pressing send. Weeks passed, and David's heart slowly drifted away from his home. He still smiled at Amara in the mornings, but his eyes were always on his phone. At work, during meetings, and even while eating dinner, his thoughts were with Miss D. Her messages had become his new comfort. She made him feel admired, special, and understood. He often told her things he never said to anyone. He told her how lonely he sometimes felt, how business meetings drained him, and how Amara no longer made him feel excited. Miss D always replied with sweet words. "You deserve to be happy, David," she wrote one night. "You're a good man. You only need someone who sees you." Those words touched him deeply. For the first time in a long while, he felt noticed. He didn't see that this attention was slowly poisoning his heart. At home, Amara began to feel invisible. She would prepare his favorite meals, jollof rice, fried plantain, and grilled fish, but most nights David came home late and barely touched the food. He would say, "I already ate," or, "I'm too tired." She would quietly clear the table and whisper a small prayer, "Lord, please help my husband remember me." But things got worse. David now locked his phone with a password. When it vibrated, he turned it upside down. When Amara entered the room, he would quickly hide the screen or act as if he was reading work messages. One night, she softly asked, "David, is everything all right?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "You've changed," she said quietly. "You hardly talk to me anymore." He sighed and put his phone down. "Amara, please. I'm under a lot of stress. You won't understand." Then he picked his phone again, ending the conversation. That night, while David texted in the living room, Amara stood by the bedroom door watching him. The smile on his face as he typed made her chest tighten. She wondered who makes him smile like that. The next day she noticed something strange. On the dining table, David had left his phone for a moment while answering a call. A message appeared, "Miss D, I saw your photo from last week. That blue shirt looks nice on you." Amara's heart skipped. She didn't touch the phone, but the name Miss D burned into her memory. From that day she became quiet but alert. She watched him closely, how he hummed when reading messages, how he stayed in the car for 10 minutes before entering the house, and how he now cared more about his looks. He used a new perfume, styled his hair differently, and even started wearing wristwatches again. One evening when he left his laptop open, Amara walked by and saw a folder titled Work Reports 2025. But when she opened it, it wasn't reports, it was screenshots of his chat with Miss D. Her hands shook as she read. "Miss D, you're such a smart man. Your wife is lucky. David, she doesn't appreciate me anymore. Miss D, maybe she's too used to you. Some women forget how to make their men feel special. David, you understand me more than anyone." Tears filled Amara's eyes. She closed the laptop quietly and sat on the bed. She didn't shout. She didn't cry out loud. She only felt a deep sadness growing inside her. Later that night, when David came to bed, she pretended to be asleep. He smiled as he picked up his phone and continued chatting. The glow from his screen reflected on his face, and she watched him secretly through half-closed eyes. The man she loved was now giving his heart to a stranger. The next morning, Amara looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked tired. "No," she whispered, "I will not fight in anger. I will find out who she is." She took her phone and created a new social media account under the name Nina. She used a simple profile picture of flowers and began following the same pages David followed. After a few days, she found a profile named Miss D. Miss D's profile had no clear photo, only random pictures of coffee, books, and quotes about love and loneliness. But Amara noticed something odd. Many of Miss D's posts were made at the same times David came home late or sat texting in the living room. It was almost like they lived in the same rhythm. Amara decided to send a message from her fake account. "Hi Miss D," she typed, pretending to be friendly. "I came across your post. You seem interesting." Miss D replied almost immediately, "Hi Nina. Thank you. I just write about things that come from the heart." Over the next few days they talked casually. Amara kept her tone light but observant. She learned that Miss D worked from home, loved married men who were honest, and believed love was about connection, not labels. Amara's suspicion grew stronger. She began noticing details in Miss D's words. One evening Miss D mentioned that her mother's village was in Enugu, the same as Amara's. Another time she mentioned that she once cooked egusi soup and burnt it because she was distracted by a phone call. That same day, Amara remembered burning soup too, while David had been laughing on his phone in the living room. Her stomach turned. Could it be someone close? Then came the shock. One night, when David was in the shower, Amara checked his messages again. She didn't open them, but she saw a new photo notification. The preview showed a familiar necklace. It was a golden chain with a heart pendant, the same one she owned. Her heart started pounding. She ran to her mirror and opened her jewelry box. The necklace was gone. Amara froze. Her hands trembled as her mind tried to understand. Miss D's photo showed her own necklace. But how? She thought about the day she had misplaced it. 2 weeks earlier she couldn't find it and assumed it had fallen somewhere in the house. Now it made sense. Amara suddenly realized something terrifying. Miss D wasn't a stranger from far away. She was someone who knew her very well. Someone who had access to her things, her home, maybe even her phone. That night she couldn't sleep. Her heart beat fast with anger, fear, and confusion. She wanted to scream, but she stayed calm. She needed proof. The next morning she decided to test something. While David was having breakfast, she mentioned a story she had just made up. "Did you hear about that couple in Lekki?" she said casually. The husband was chatting with a woman online, not knowing she was his wife's cousin. David laughed carelessly. "That's impossible. Women don't do such things." Amara smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what women can do when they're hurt." That night, she sent Miss D a message again from her fake account. "Do you ever feel guilty talking to a married man?" Miss D replied, "Not really. Sometimes wives forget to take care of their men. If they don't, someone else will." Amara's eyes filled with tears. Her fingers shook as she typed, "What if his wife finds out?" Miss D sent a laughing emoji. "She won't. He trusts me too much." Amara placed her phone down and took a deep breath. The woman who was destroying her marriage was confident. Too confident. And that made Amara more determined. She sat in silence, watching the city lights through the window. Her mind raced, her heart heavy. She knew now that the truth was close, maybe closer than she ever imagined. Whatever happened next, she was ready. Because she wasn't just a quiet wife anymore. She was a woman who had seen enough, and she was about to uncover a secret that would shake both their lives forever. David could not stop thinking about Miss D. Every day her messages made him feel like a young man again. She knew what to say, how to make him laugh, and how to make him forget his worries. When he woke up, she was the first person he texted. When he went to bed, her goodnight messages were the last thing he read. It had been months now, and he felt like he truly knew her. At least that's what he believed. One evening, as he sat in his office staring at her messages, Miss D sent him a teasing text. "Maybe it's time we meet face to face, don't you think?" David's heart jumped. He smiled at the screen like a boy in love. "Are you sure?" he typed. "You might fall for me in person." Her reply came quickly, "We'll see who falls first." That night, David couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, imagining what Miss D looked like. Her voice was soft and playful, her words full of charm. He pictured her wearing a lovely dress, smiling at him across a dinner table. He convinced himself it was harmless, just a meeting between two adults who understood each other. The next morning he told Amara that he had a meeting with a new client that weekend. She smiled politely and said, "That's fine, dear." But deep down, her heart was calm, not because she believed him but because she already knew what was coming. She had been following every clue carefully. Every time he mentioned Miss D, every time he smiled at his phone, she had taken note. And now she knew that Miss D wanted to meet him. Amara decided she wouldn't cry this time. She would face him. When Saturday came, David spent extra time dressing up. He ironed his shirt twice, polished his shoes, and sprayed more perfume than usual. He even looked in the mirror and smiled at his reflection. "You still got it," he whispered to himself. Amara watched him quietly. He kissed her on the cheek before leaving. "Don't wait up," he said. "The meeting might take long." She nodded, hiding a small smile. As soon as he left, she opened her wardrobe and pulled out a short wig she had never worn before. Then she applied light makeup, red lipstick, and wore a simple but elegant black dress. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "Let's see how well you know Miss D," she whispered. At the restaurant, David arrived early. The soft music, dim lights, and smell of roasted chicken filled the air. He checked his watch and texted, "I'm here already." A few minutes later, the door opened and Amara walked in. David looked up and froze for a second. He saw a woman who looked beautiful and confident, wearing a short wig and a red dress that caught everyone's eye. He stood up immediately, smiling widely. "You must be Miss D," he said, extending his hand. Amara smiled gently. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, and you must be David." Her tone was soft but carried a hidden edge. David didn't recognize her. The lighting was dim, and her new look made her appear like a different woman. They sat down. The waiter brought water and menus. David leaned forward with a charming smile. "I can't believe I'm finally meeting you. You're even more stunning than your photos." Amara looked into his eyes and replied, "And you're exactly as careless as I expected." He laughed, not realizing the hidden meaning behind her words. "Careless?" he asked. "Why do you say that?" She smiled faintly. "You'll see." As they talked, Amara studied him. He spoke with confidence, the same voice he used when lying at home. He told her about his business, about how hard life was, and how people didn't understand him. He even complained about his wife, calling her distant and quiet. Amara listened without interrupting. Every word he said cut deeper into her heart, but she remained calm. She wanted him to show her exactly who he had become. "Maybe your wife has changed because you've changed," she said softly. He laughed again. "You sound just like her. Always serious." Amara tilted her head. "Maybe seriousness is a sign of care." David waved his hand. "You wouldn't understand. Some marriages just lose their spark." Amara leaned forward. "And you think meeting someone like me will bring it back?" He smiled boldly. "Maybe. You make me feel alive again." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Be careful what makes you feel alive, David. Sometimes it's the same thing that kills you slowly." He didn't understand. He thought she was being poetic. He touched her hand lightly and said, "I wish I met you earlier." Amara felt her chest tighten. For a moment she almost wanted to stop pretending. But she reminded herself why she was there, to make him see the truth. "So," she said, changing her tone, "how long have you been talking to Miss D?" David chuckled. "A few months, but it feels like years. She understands me better than anyone. Sometimes I think she even reads my mind." Amara nodded slowly. "Interesting. And what if Miss D was someone you already knew?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Someone close to you," she said, leaning closer. "Someone you've known for a long time." He laughed nervously. "That would be strange." Amara's eyes glinted. "Would you still feel the same way if Miss D turned out to be your wife?" David frowned. "My wife? No, that's impossible." "Why impossible?" she asked calmly. "Do you think your wife can't be interesting or beautiful or mysterious?" He stared at her, unsure whether she was joking. "You sound just like her," he said quietly. She smiled again. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." They ate in silence for a few minutes. David felt something strange in his stomach, a mix of guilt and curiosity. There was something familiar about the way she spoke, the way she paused before each word, the way her eyes softened when she smiled. Finally, Amara decided it was time. She slowly reached into her purse, pulled out a handkerchief, and gently wiped her lipstick. Then, with steady hands, she removed her short wig. David's fork fell from his hand. His eyes widened. The woman sitting across from him was no stranger. It was Amara. He froze, his heart racing. "Amara?" he whispered, his voice trembling. She looked at him calmly. "Yes, David. It's me, your wife. Or should I say your side chick?" David's face turned pale. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. He looked around, embarrassed and afraid. "Amara, I can explain?" She raised her hand gently. "No need. You've explained enough in your messages. You told Miss D everything, your secrets, your feelings, your lies. You said your wife doesn't understand you. Well, here she is. Do you understand her now?" The restaurant was silent except for the faint music playing in the background. David looked down, his pride shattered. Amara stood up slowly. You didn't fall in love with another woman, she said softly. You fell in love with the part of me you forgot existed. Then she turned and walked away, leaving David sitting alone, speechless and broken. He watched her leave, realizing that the game he thought was harmless had destroyed something real. The woman he had been chasing all along was the same woman he had once vowed to love forever. If only he had looked closer, he would have seen that Miss D was never a stranger. She was the same Amara he had been running from, only now she was strong enough to make him face his own truth. David sat across from the woman he thought was Miss D, still feeling that rush of excitement that had brought him here. The lights in the restaurant were dim and soft music played in the background. Everything seemed perfect, just like he had imagined during those late-night chats. She was even more beautiful in person, confident, calm, and mysterious. Her perfume lingered in the air, familiar yet distant. They laughed as they talked, sharing jokes and stories, and for a while David forgot everything else. He leaned forward, his eyes shining, completely drawn to her voice. There was something about her tone, something that made him feel like he already knew her, but he pushed the thought away. You know, he said, smiling proudly, you're nothing like I imagined. You're better. She smiled softly. And you're exactly what I expected. He laughed. I hope that's a good thing. Maybe, she said, her eyes not leaving his. David liked her confidence. It was different from the women he usually met. She didn't try too hard to impress him. She simply sat there, calm, almost too calm. Every word she said carried meaning, but he didn't notice. He was too focused on how beautiful she looked. When the waiter brought their food, David raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. She raised hers too, but her hand didn't shake like his did. Her voice was steady. Yes to truth. They clinked glasses. David smiled and began to talk about his life. His business, his struggles, his dreams. He spoke with pride, the same way he always did when he wanted to sound important. He didn't notice that she already knew every detail he was sharing. Do you live alone? He asked curiously. She looked at him for a long moment before replying. No. I live with someone who forgets what love really means. He chuckled. That sounds like a sad story. Maybe, she said quietly. But some stories only become sad because people make the wrong choices. He didn't understand what she meant. He just smiled and said, well, I'd never hurt someone I care about. She raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Of course, he replied quickly, his smile fading a little. I'm a good man. Her eyes softened, but there was sadness behind them. A good man doesn't always know when he's losing himself. David stared at her, confused. There was something familiar in her words, in her voice, even in the way she moved her hands when she spoke. But his mind refused to believe what his heart was starting to suspect. She leaned back and said, tell me about your wife. What's she like? He paused for a second. She's fine, he said simply. But we're not the same anymore. She's changed. She doesn't understand me. Or maybe, the woman said softly, you stopped trying to understand her. David blinked, caught off guard. Why would you say that? She shrugged. Just a thought. Sometimes men forget that the woman they married is the same woman they once begged to love them. Her words made him uncomfortable. He took a sip of water and looked away. You talk like you've been married before. She smiled faintly. Let's just say I know what it feels like to be forgotten. For a moment, silence filled the table. The air felt heavy. David forced a laugh to break it. You sound too serious, Miss D. Let's not talk about sad things. I'm here to enjoy your company. She nodded slowly. Enjoy it while you can. He didn't notice the warning in her voice. He leaned closer, lowering his tone. You know, I've imagined this moment for weeks. You're everything I wanted. Her eyes glistened. Am I really everything you wanted? Of course, he said without hesitation. You're beautiful, funny, and you understand me. She smiled, a sad, tired smile. Then, without saying another word, she reached into her purse, pulled out a small mirror, and began to adjust her wig. David watched her curiously, wondering what she was doing. Then she slowly removed it. At first he thought it was a joke. He blinked, leaned forward, and stared at her face. His heart stopped. The woman sitting in front of him wasn't Miss D. It was Amara. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands trembled. His throat went dry. Amara, he whispered. She looked at him, not with anger but with a calm, heartbreaking sadness. Yes, David, she said softly. It's me. David's face turned pale. His heart pounded like a drum. I don't understand, he stammered. What are you doing here? She leaned forward. The real question is, what are you doing here? Or should I say, who were you planning to meet? He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I thought. She cut him off gently. You thought you were meeting your side chick. The one you've been hiding from your wife. The one you thought was better than her. Tears filled his eyes. Amara, I'm sorry. Please just let me explain. She shook her head slowly. Explain what, David? That you've been lying to me? That you've been calling another woman your piece, while I've been at home praying for our marriage? He lowered his head, ashamed. The weight of his guilt pressed on his chest. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he whispered. But it did, she said firmly. You looked for excitement outside your home when it was right in front of you. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. You wanted adventure, David. You wanted someone new. But tell me, what did you find? A stranger? Or the same woman you promised to love? David couldn't look at her. His shame was too heavy. I was foolish, he said softly. I thought I'd lost the spark. I didn't know you still cared. Amara's eyes filled with tears. You never tried to find out. You were too busy chasing shadows. She stood up, her voice breaking now. You wanted excitement? Maybe you should have looked at the woman you vowed to love. She was still here, waiting for you to remember her. David rose quickly, trying to hold her hand, but she stepped back. Amara, please, he pleaded. I love you. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. She looked at him for a long moment. Do you even know what love means anymore? He had no answer. His silence said it all. The waiter, unaware of what had just happened, came over and asked quietly, Would you like dessert, sir? David shook his head, unable to speak. The waiter walked away, and the sound of soft jazz filled the silence between them. Amara took her purse and turned toward the door. You don't need dessert, David, she said gently. You've already had your lesson. As she walked away, David stood there, frozen. He watched her leave, her head held high. The room felt smaller, emptier, colder. When she disappeared through the door, he sat back down, staring at the chair she had just left. The same woman he had been flirting with for months, the one who had made him feel alive, was his wife, the woman he had stopped seeing, though she had always been there. David covered his face with his hands. Tears rolled down his cheeks. For the first time he realized the depth of what he had done. He had betrayed the only person who truly loved him, not with another woman, but with a part of her he had forgotten. And as he sat there, alone in that quiet restaurant, the truth echoed in his mind like a haunting voice. He had been chasing excitement while the real love he needed had been beside him all along. David sat in his car that night long after Amara had left the restaurant. The city lights blurred through the windshield, mixing with the tears in his eyes. He could still hear her words echoing in his mind, sharp and painful. Asterisk, you wanted excitement? Maybe you should have looked at the woman you vowed to love. Asterisk. For the first time in years he felt truly alone. His pride, his charm, his confidence, none of it mattered anymore. He had broken the one thing that had always been real. When he returned home, the house felt different. The lights were off, the air was quiet, and Amara's slippers were neatly placed by the door. He stood there for a long time, afraid to go in. Every corner of that house held a memory of her, the laughter, the shared meals, the small jokes they once had. Now, it all felt like it belonged to someone else. He walked into their bedroom and saw that she was already asleep. Or at least pretending to be. Her back was turned, her breathing steady. David wanted to speak, but his throat was dry. Words felt useless now. So, he sat quietly on the edge of the bed and whispered, I'm sorry. No reply came. The next morning, Amara moved around the house like nothing had happened. She cooked breakfast, watered the plants, and hummed softly as she cleaned. David watched her, amazed by her calmness. He wanted to say something, anything, but she spoke first. Eat before you go, she said simply. He nodded, sitting down. He took a spoonful of rice but couldn't swallow. His guilt was too heavy. Amara, he said slowly, please let me explain. She looked at him, her eyes calm but distant. David, I don't need your words. I need your actions. That hit him deeply. From that day, David decided to prove his remorse, not with promises but with change. He stopped staying out late. He stopped hiding his phone. He deleted every contact that had once tempted him. He even removed the social media accounts he had used to chat with Miss D. At work, his friends noticed something different. The man who once joked loudly about women and parties now left early to go home. David, are you sick? One of his colleagues teased. You used to be the life of the office. David just smiled faintly. Maybe I was sick before, he replied. When he reached home, he helped Amara in the kitchen, something he had never done before. He peeled yam awkwardly, sliced tomatoes with too much care, and burned his fingers once while frying. Amara laughed a little, unable to hide it. "Careful," she said, shaking her head. "You're not used to this." He smiled shyly. "I want to be." She didn't respond, but her silence wasn't cold anymore. Over the next few weeks, David kept showing up. He listened when she spoke, noticed when she was tired, and even remembered small things: her favorite tea, her favorite song, and the way she liked her hair braided. He realized how much he had missed by being distracted with meaningless attention. Each evening, he would sit beside her and talk, not to impress her, but to understand her again. Sometimes she would stay quiet, but she always listened. One night, while they sat on the balcony, Amara spoke softly. "Do you know why I created that fake account?" David looked down, embarrassed. "To catch me." She shook her head. "No. To remind myself who you really were. I needed to see how far you had drifted." Her voice trembled slightly. "I wanted to see if the man I married still existed." David's chest tightened. "And did you find him?" She looked at him for a long time. "Not that night," she said. "But maybe I'm starting to see him again." David reached for her hand. "I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that he never truly left." Tears filled Amara's eyes, but she didn't pull her hand away. The days passed and slowly things began to heal. Amara started to smile again. The warmth in her voice returned. The home felt alive once more. Sometimes she would catch David staring at her with quiet admiration, and she would blush like she used to when they were newly married. One evening after dinner, David walked up to her while she was washing dishes. "You've done too much today," he said gently, taking the sponge from her. She raised an eyebrow. "You're washing now?" He chuckled. "Well, someone has to earn forgiveness." She laughed quietly. It was the sound he had missed most. Later that night, they sat together in the living room watching an old movie they both loved. The silence between them was peaceful now, not heavy. Amara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think love can survive betrayal?" she asked softly. David sighed. "Only if both hearts are willing to heal." She nodded. "Then maybe there's hope for us." He smiled. "There's more than hope, Amara. There's truth." Amara looked up at him. "Love doesn't die easily," she said gently. "But it needs honesty to live." Those words stayed in David's heart forever. Weeks later, when friends invited him out for drinks or joked about women, David would just smile and shake his head. "Come on, David," they would tease. "Don't tell us your wife locked you up at home." He would laugh lightly. "No one locked me up," he'd say. "I just learned my lesson the hard way." They would laugh even harder, not understanding. "Lesson? What kind of lesson?" David would take a slow sip of his drink, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Let's just say if you knew who my side chick was, you'd never laugh again." They all went quiet, confused, and he never explained. He didn't need to. Some truths were too deep to share, and some lessons were meant to stay in the heart. At home, Amara sometimes caught him staring at her when she was reading or cooking. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she would ask with a small smile. He would shrug and say softly, "Because I almost lost the best part of my life." Amara would smile, shaking her head. "You're learning." "Yes," he'd reply. "And I'll never stop." Their love didn't go back to how it was before. It became something deeper, quieter, stronger. It was no longer about perfection or excitement. It was about two people choosing each other again, after nearly breaking apart. Every morning before leaving for work, David kissed her forehead and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And she always answered, "Just don't give me a reason to." In time, the story of David and Amara became a quiet reminder to those who knew them, that temptation can destroy what pride cannot repair, and that real love is built not on excitement but on truth. Whenever someone asked David how he managed to change, he would smile and reply softly, "Because the woman I almost lost was worth more than all the excitement in the world." He never forgot that night at the restaurant, the night his wife became his lesson, his mirror, and his second chance.